News move, it's certainly in tune with the zeitgeist. Once on the very fringe of politics, nowadays everyone's glad to be green. Just look at the Conservatives' new tree logo. But if mainstream politicians are competing to see who could win the environmental vote, where does that leave the Green Party itself? Our political correspondent David Grossman's been finding out.
As Min Campbell finished up the Lib Dem gathering in Brighton, there's going to be a short gap in the big, slick party conferences.
If you can't actually wait for the Labour conference to kick off in Manchester, just down the road from Brighton, here in Hove, there's another conference you can go to. So, it's off with the Lib Dems and on with the Greens.
The Green Party likes to start its conference with a minute's silence to clear everybody's heads, and you certainly need one here.
Stupid, aren't we?
The setup is like a pub quiz. The Greens sit round tables. Everyone's specialist subject appears to be the party's rules and regulations. But before we can start the session, there's the first of many, many points of order.
A quick point of order, can we actually have the media removed from this at the moment, please?
I'm starting to feel unloved here. I can't imagine why they wouldn't want Newsnight sniffing around. Maybe some of them are bunking off work.
Can we have those in favour of excluding the media, please show using your green cards? And those against? Well, you can stay, sir. I hope you...
Phew, that's 1-0 to freedom of the press. Now we can get on with the main business. The first item is the report back by the Standing Orders Committee, which is every bit as interesting as it sounds. Here's what I think is happening. The Standing Orders Committee is represented by a young man with a laptop. He's up against a man with a ponytail and a beard, and another with a hat and a beard. They're discussing whether the nomination papers of this man are invalid or not. Keith Taylor is one of the party's 2 principal speakers, and as such, one of their media faces. Maybe because he has no hat, no ponytail, and only the merest hint of a beard. It appears that one of the people who nominated him for re-election was not a full party member.
Democracy depends on adhering to our rules. If we can bend the rules for one person, we can bend the rules for any person, and democracy goes down the pan.
About an hour and a half later, they get to vote. The 2 counters are baffled when it's a dead heat. What to do? But then brainwave. They remember they've forgotten to count themselves. Therefore, the amendments fall. I'll ignore the recount and the calls for a card vote for the sake of brevity. The man with the ponytail is not happy.
Gentlemen, I have no confidence in it.
I am, of course, being very unfair to the Greens. All parties do this kind of thing, only the Greens are brave enough to vote the cameras in. The party, though, does have a problem, apart from snide journalists. The other parties are increasingly trampling on their traditional territory.
I support. Where is it? Here we are. Climate Change Now campaign. It's environmentalism in action.
The global environment.
Climate change. Climate change. Climate change.
Environmental change.
A greener Britain. A new green revolution.
Meanwhile, back at the real Green Party conference lunch break, I spoke to Keith Taylor, now safe from the attempt to get rid of him. The Green agenda is
exactly
becoming
what it looked like.
Pretty crowded at the moment. How can the Greens retain its sort of ownership of the territory?
I think what sets our party to one side is our vision. If you look at the other Liberal Democrats and the Tories, they're coming out with lots of green ideas, but in fact that's simply politics, because if you look behind, they're simply tinkering around the edges. They're not actually getting to the root causes of climate change and attacking those. What they're doing is they're introducing a green taxation, for example, which is part of the solution, but it's only part. It won't work on its own. They actually want their cake and they want to eat it.
Part of any conference is fringe events. This one is supposed to be put on by the Young Greens, although many of the people here look like they were Young Greens quite a while ago. I'm going to know what made the young Greens join this party rather than any of the others.
Because it was the only party that was standing in my area that actually really truly addressed the issues that I was concerned about, and I felt were really honest and were talking about it seriously. It wasn't just something that was sort of on the surface, that sort of to catch media attention.
She's just
On
saved
to the
entire
afternoon session,
broadcast there.
and the conference started discussing education. It lacked some of the energy of the procedural debates of the morning, but hey, that's modern politics. Process and personality is often much more exciting than policy. But I'm sure there will be plenty of points of order over the next 3 days.
Yes, it's ridiculous, these points
David
of order.
Rossman. Well, I'm joined now from Brighton by Caroline Lucas, who's one of the party's principal spokespeople. What is your USP? Well, we've got government ministers and hybrid cars, we've got David Cameron and his oak tree logo, the Lib Dems will say they've always been just as green as you.
Well, I think one of them is certainly the fact that we act on what we say, because to look at the Liberal Democrats, for example, yes, putting some kind of emissions charge on aviation is a good first start. But when you've got Liberal Democrat councillors up and down the country basically supporting a massive expansion of airport capacity from Manchester to Leeds, from Sheffield to Exeter, then that completely undermines what the leadership is trying to do with its emissions tax. So I think what Greens deliver is a genuine commitment. It's not just about trying to catch on to the latest fashion. It really is about policies that we've been working on for literally 30 years.
It may be a genuine commitment, but you're not actually in a position where you're ever going to be able to do anything about it. When you've only got 92 councillors and a couple of MEPs. If people really care about the green agenda, surely they need to vote for one of the mainstream political parties who now have put the environment firmly in the middle of their agenda.
They've put the language in the middle of their agenda, but they haven't put the policies, and that's of what's concerned to us. And yes, you know, we need to make more gains at local level, and we're doing that. Here in Brighton, we've got 6 councillors more than the Liberals. In the local elections just gone, we went from 1 councillor to 12 in London. Of course, it's going to be difficult for a small party until we get proportional representation at Westminster. But nonetheless, in the European Parliament, it's the Greens who are really spearheading the policies, for example, on aviation, making sure that there will be some serious regulation so we don't have to depend on Richard Branson having nice brainwaves and giving us a bit of his profits.
What is your view of Richard Branson's proposals, by the way?
Well, what I'd like him to be doing is to be lobbying government for regulation for all airlines, not just for Virgin, but to make sure that all airlines are actually paying taxes properly and are beginning to constrain their growth. And also, while he's at it, he could be lobbying them to have some better corporation tax. So there are measures that we desperately need from this government, real political leadership. And I think the fact that we're having to rely on the generosity of Richard Branson really demonstrates the bankruptcy of the kind of political system we've got at the moment.
Isn't the overall political dilemma for you that when so many of the other parties are stealing your clothes, the only way forward is either just to be like them, therefore you lack differentiation, or to go more in a dark green direction, which is what you used to talk about, and thus appear rather extreme?
I don't think we appear extreme. I think we've been looking at these questions for around 30 years. That's a lot longer than any of the other parties. And I think as a result of that, we're much more likely to have some of the better answers. And what we see now is, yes, the other parties slowly coming in our direction. But we don't have the luxury of time. We heard just last week that we've got between 4 and 10 years to put in place the kind of policy framework we urgently need to make the kind of changes towards a sustainable lifestyle. That's what the Tyndall Centre was saying last week. And so we need the urgency. And so quite frankly, I think the fact that the other parties are talking about green issues is very useful. It means that I get the chance to be on programmes like this. But I think people will see through that and see that what we need is action commensurate to the kind of challenge that we face. And for as long as we've got this gulf between the rhetoric and the action, you know, as long as we've got David Cameron with his shoes in the car, then it's not going to be enough.
Okay, Caroline Lucas, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Coming up on the programme, the President of Iran denies the Holocaust happened.